And now, it's time for your Low Country Real Estate Market Update. It's the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. Brian is one of the top 1% real estate agents in Charleston. Find him online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. Or call him at 843-800-0065. That's 843-800-0065. Now, broadcasting from the WTMA studios, here's your host, Brian Beatty.
Good morning, Charleston. Welcome to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show. Today is the day you have probably been waiting for me to talk about this lawsuit that kind of swept the nation in the middle of March. March 15th is when this settlement with the National Association of Realtors came due. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about how much the media has sensationalized this, printing incorrect information about this settlement. I'm going to talk about the settlement itself. I'm going to talk about what it means. I'm going to talk about some of these changes that we are going to expect to occur, which will be sometime in like mid-July is when things will take shape and really go into action here. But I'm also in the studio. Now, I'm going to add some disclaimers before I say this. First of all, I'm not an attorney, okay? There are going to be some questions I cannot or will not answer on this particular topic. But I invite you to call into the station today because I'd really love to hear your opinion on this. You know, are real estate agents obsolete now, like so many, entities are saying we are? Or is there still value in what we do? What's your experience been like? Are you looking forward to maybe taking on these projects and doing these things yourself? Or have you had successful transactions with real estate agents in the past to where you understand and agree with their value? Or are you somewhere in the middle? Do you just have some questions? You know, the number here in the studio, if you want to call in today and talk with me about this, is 843-556-1250. That's 843-556-1250. Now, if you want to reach out to me personally, you're thinking about buying a home, selling a home, investing in real estate, you have a property you'd like for us to manage. Maybe you're thinking about getting into real estate as an industry. Let's talk about that in great detail. But if we can help you, I mean, look, and if you guys haven't heard me on this show before, I've been doing this for almost 20 years, selling real estate locally. I've sold about 1,500 homes, about $1 billion worth of real estate here locally. So I've been around for a little while, know a thing or two, and would love the opportunity to apply for the job of being your real estate agent, which is something that a lot of real estate agents, maybe those that are listening to this program or those that watch us online on YouTube or wherever, are just not used to. They're not used to having to apply and demonstrate value, right? That's part of the reason why this lawsuit came into existence in the first place, is because people felt like the value wasn't consistent with the paycheck. And so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about what has changed, what will change, and how I think this is going to impact the process moving forward. It's for me very, very interesting. I know there are a lot of agents out there that are freaking out, thinking that their job, they're going to have to go and apply for a job because people won't want to use them to help them buy a home. And they've never really represented a seller because they haven't, developed that skill set, or they don't have any money to market properties. They've just been reliant upon getting buyers through the front door and then asking them, hey, do you like this? Do you want to make an offer? If so, I can help you. I can represent you. Blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of changes that are coming that will change the way that real estate agents interact with consumers and the way that consumers are able to interact with real estate agents. So I'm not going to, I'm just going to deliver the facts because, again, the media has sensationalized this. They have printed a significant amount of inaccurate information about this settlement. But essentially what happened was the National Association of Realtors and several large real estate brokerages, it was stated that they conspired to require that home sellers pay home buyers agent commissions, which is a violation of federal antitrust law, and that the quote-unquote standard 6% commission was a form of price fixing. Okay? And so here is what some of these media outlets have said. And here are some headlines. CNN, the 6% commission on buying or selling a home is gone after Realtor Association agrees to seismic settlement. The 6% commission, as standard in home purchase transactions, is no more. Settlement breaks up the real estate cartel. The collusive arrangement among real estate agents that led to Americans paying extortionate commissions is likely over. Settlement could erase real estate commission standard. I mean, there's a lot of inaccuracy just in those headlines. The reality is commissions have always been negotiable. They've always been negotiable. How do I know that? And how do I know you know that? Because when you call and you talk with me about helping you sell your home, you ask what my commission is and you try to negotiate it. I mean, this is nothing new. I refuse to believe that the public collectively had no idea that commissions were negotiable. I mean, even the president of our country can't get it right. And this is, he was given a speech in Las Vegas talking about his new housing proposal. And during his speech, he referenced the settlement with the National Association of Realtors, that was recently, negotiated. And he says, and this is, I'm quoting right now, he says, for the first time, Americans can negotiate lower commissions when they buy or sell their home. On a typical home purchase, that alone could save folks on average $10,000 on the sale or purchase. Then he goes on to say, I'm calling on realtors to follow through on lower commissions to protect home buyers. Excuse me? We are not the reason why we are in an unaffordable housing market. And I'll give you my opinion here in just a second, but this is what the president of the National Association of Realtors said, and this is a quote. While the National Association of Realtors appreciates President Biden's continued focus on the affordable housing crisis, the president unfortunately repeated incorrect claims that the recently announced settlement agreement allows Americans to negotiate commissions for the first time. Commissions were already negotiable before this resolution was reached and will continue to be negotiable as they have been. Real estate agent commissions are driven by the market and are not the cause of the affordability crisis. Now, I can't remember a time where an industry was singled out like we have been recently. And maybe I'm just a little bitter at the moment, but that is like saying I am calling on all farmers to accept less for the crops that they grow because food is too expensive. Guys, the number is 843-556-1250. Let me know if I'm off base here. But I think that confusion leads to fear, and fear leads to panic, and panic leads to paralysis. And the changes that are coming in the grand scheme of things are really not all that big. The interesting thing is that South Carolina is one of 11 states in the country that was requiring a lot of what this settlement is now requiring of everybody across the country. It's funny because, a lot of us South Carolina real estate agents are like, well, what's the big deal with that? I mean, we've been doing that for years and years and years. In other words, our standard of practice really hasn't changed. What is important to understand are some technical changes that might have big impacts on the industry and the way in which people buy and sell real estate or view real estate or view the help of real estate agents. We're going to have to get much better at articulating our value, at being very clear with folks about what we do and when, how, why, how much we get paid and by who. There's been a lack of transparency in our industry, in my opinion. And we're the professionals, so we're the ones that need to accept responsibility for what's happened, because there are way too many people that are not following the rules. The reality is what this lawsuit has created is a laser-like focus on the way this business is supposed to be done. The problem is agents have gotten complacent. And I'm not going to blame anybody other than our industry for this. I will say that when you have a market that is so incredibly frantic that when a property goes for sale and gets 10 offers by 5 p.m. that afternoon, kind of like what we had in the past several years, then it necessitates very quick reactions if you actually want to be the person that's going to buy that house. As a result of that, a lot of people have skipped steps. They have tried to streamline this process, and in doing so, they didn't follow the steps that they're supposed to follow as it relates to license law in South Carolina. You know, you're supposed to have a conversation about working together. You're supposed to go through an agency disclosure brochure that says, hey, here's the difference between being a customer and a client. Here's the difference between different types of agency. Do you understand that? Would you like to remain a customer, or would you like to hire me as a real estate agent? Because if you want to hire me as a real estate agent, here are all the things that I'm going to do for you. Here's how long this agreement's going to last. Here's what I'm expecting of you. Here's what you're expecting of me. Here's how much I'm going to get paid, how much, when, where, all that good stuff. Here's the length of the agreement. But the problem is people are saying, hey, look, I don't care about any of that stuff. I just want to go and see a house. Just let me through the front door. Well, one of the big changes is that we're not allowed to do that anymore. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about some of these changes. We're going to talk about how that's going to impact you, the consumer, how it's going to impact us, the industry, and how we are going to work together to get through this. This is not a doom and gloom episode. This is me shedding light on the changes and helping you understand that the great real estate agents out there are going to explain and adapt to these new rules, all in doing so for your benefit, to get you the best deal on a house, to sell your home for the most money possible, to represent you and your best interests. That's what the really good real estate agents have always done, and that's what I'm going to continue to do with my business. But if you want to reach out to me, you have some questions about this suit as we get through it, as we get through the show, the number is 843-556-1250 if you want to call into the show. 843-556-1250. My number, personally, if you want to reach out to me, is 843-800-0065, 843-800-0065, or check us out online at listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. This is an interesting show because we're talking about this NAR lawsuit that I am sure the majority of you have read, watched, heard about already. There's a lot of misconception out there with what's going on with this lawsuit. Now, again, I'm not an attorney. There are several resources that are available for you guys to get the facts rather than rely on some of these media outlets that have just gotten it wrong, period. But it is going to change the way that real estate agents operate, and it's going to change the way that you as a consumer operate to an extent with real estate agents. You know, one of the big, I guess, first misconceptions is that sellers now no longer have to pay a real estate agent a commission, whether it's a listing agent or a buyer agent. Look, guys, you've never been obligated to pay a commission. I'm pretty sure we all know that for sale by owners have been around for quite a while. Just like you can go and purchase a property from a for sale by owner and not have a real estate agent. Really what they're aiming at, though, is that the seller, if they're going to work with the real estate agent, doesn't also have to compensate the buyer agent, right? It's been very commonplace that a seller paid both the listing agent's commission and the buyer agent's commission, but that has never been required or an obligation. It's been an option. But we have sold multiple properties over the years where there was no buyer agent because they hired us to sell their home internally to the people that we've already been in contact with that are looking for a home like what they were selling. Now, there was a agent that represented that buyer, either myself personally or on my team, but the commission was negotiable. And that's a big change that I think a lot of agents are going to have to get used to, is that they're going to have to figure out a way to demonstrate their value, and they're going to have options for folks that say, if this is what you want, this is what I offer, here are all the different things I'm going to do for you, and here's how I get paid, or here are the different ways in which I can get paid. Rather than just, hey, here are a bunch of homes, I've set you up with a search, I'm happy to answer any questions. If you see something you like, let me know. I'll go and I'll show it to you. And then if you want to make an offer, then we can talk about, what I think I would do in that situation. And if all that sounds good, then you can hire me as your agent. That is not the way it's supposed to be done. And that is one of the reasons why this lawsuit and the National Association of Realtors ultimately settled, is because they understand that real estate agents are not doing things the way they're supposed to be done. Now, again, if you've got some questions about what's going on with this suit, again, as we get through this information, don't be bashful. Feel free to call. I'd love to hear your experience. What's your take on this? Are you excited to kind of get out there and do things on your own and not have a buyer agent and just go directly to the seller or go directly to the listing agent and say, hey, look, I just want to represent myself. There's no commission. I want to receive a discount on the home because the seller doesn't have to pay a 6% commission now. That's the thought process that a lot of people have. So are you, as a buyer, going to go to a seller now and expect them to sell the home for 3% less or price the home at 3% less? These are some interesting questions. Thanks for you to think about. The number here in the studio, 843-556-1250, 843-556-1250. My number personally, if you want to reach out to me, you want to have a chat about working together. Again, these changes won't take effect until probably mid-July. But my number is 843-800-0065. 843-800-0065 or listingsincharleston.com if you just want to get to know me and my team. But again, commission is always and always will be negotiable. You do not have to pay any commission to anyone unless you enter into a written agreement with that agent for representation, which includes what they'll do for you, how much they get paid, when, why, all that good stuff. The big change is that the commission a buyer agent can earn is no longer going to be disclosed in the MLS, which is a tool that's really only available to realtors. I mean, the idea is that if you weren't offering a certain amount of commission to a buyer agent, that they could use that as a reason not to show your home to a prospective buyer, thereby forcing sellers to pay buyer agents a competitive fee in order to sell their home in the open marketplace. Now, is that true? Was that actually happening? Well, I'd say yes is the short answer to that. That being said, a seller can still compensate a buyer agent, and the commission payable to a buyer agent can still be marketed publicly. It just can't be on the MLS, right? They don't want agents sorting a list of homes based on how much they're going to get paid. They don't want that to be even a consideration, so they're just removing the field entirely. Now, there will continue to be many ways in which a buyer broker can be compensated, including through offers of compensation communicated on the MLS. And this is such a technical but interesting change, is that, we have long believed that it is in the interest of the sellers, buyers, and their brokers to make offers of compensation, but using the MLS to communicate offers of compensation would no longer be an option. So, as an example, in the MLS right now, we can say that the seller's offering $10,000 in concessions, right? That could go toward closing costs. It could go toward flooring. It could go toward a roof. It could go toward an interest rate buy down. It could also go toward a real estate agent's commission. So what they're saying is the seller can still offer concessions, but those concessions cannot be directly conditioned upon the use of a payment to a buyer broker. In other words, the seller can't say, we're offering $10,000 in concessions to go toward buyer agent's commission. They have to leave it open-ended. And because they're removing the field entirely from the MLS, it just means that we as real estate agents now need to communicate with each listing agent to say or ask, hey, is commission being offered, so that we understand what we need to then go back to the buyer with. Are we going to view a home in which the seller is paying our commission, or is the buyer going to have to pay our commission? And I think this overwhelming conception is that, or concept is that sellers are no longer paying buyer brokers. Sellers are no longer going to compensate a buyer agent at all, which means that buyers now have to pay the commission to the buyer agent if they want that kind of help. Well, let's use an example. Let's say that you've just gotten a job, kind of like your first really good paying job, enough for you to be able to afford to buy a house, right? And you've been working some other jobs, you've saved up enough of a down payment, and you're finally in the market and you've got your 3.5% down payment, okay? You're not putting down 20%. You don't have to put down 20% to buy a house. But if you haven't served in the military, the minimum is about 3.5%. Some can go to 3%. So my lovely program director, John Quincy, is here in the studio with me. And so, John, let's just say as an example that let's do a flashback, right, to just a few years, right? Let's say you're 30 years old and you've just gotten, a great job, and you were born and raised in Charleston, and you are now moving to Boise, Idaho, because you've just gotten this great job. Well, John, let me ask you, have you ever been to Boise, Idaho? No. Know anything about the real estate market there? About schools, about crime, about lifestyle, about, frankly, anything?
No.
Okay. So I'm your employer in this instance, and you've got 2 months to start this new job.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you're still expected to be at work Monday through Friday at your current job, which means you probably need to do this stuff over the weekend, right? And don't let me catch you searching for real estate online during company time, right? But you're going to have to go to Boise, Idaho, probably this weekend and next weekend, and go and figure out where you're going to live. And obviously, you don't have enough cash saved up to pay a buyer agent a fee to help you with this process, right? That's the assumption.
Yeah.
So for simplicity's sake, you as a buyer in this instance are kind of screwed, right?
Yeah.
You can't afford a buyer, or you can't afford a buyer agent. The seller's not going to pay a buyer agent. You don't know anything about where you're going. And, what's the solution? You go and you rent for, I guess, a year.
Yeah.
And then you figure out where you really want to be. Well, in that instance, you know who wins? The landlord, the owner of the real estate, or all of these larger companies, or Wall Street for that matter, that went and purchased a ton of real estate. And that's something I see happening. I don't think I could see a future where you go into your Amazon Prime account and you're looking at your order history, you go shopping, you look at your, search history, and then you just click the button that says sell my home. And it's all done online. The idea that we're going to be wiped out as an industry, in my opinion, is not realistic. But I'll tell you that, and John, thank you for participating in that example. But
you're welcome.
The idea that sellers are no longer going to compensate buyer agents is fine, but let's talk about the impact that not just for the real estate agent, right? Let's talk about the impact to the seller. Let's talk about the impact to the buyer. There's a lot more to unpack here as we continue to talk about some of the changes that are coming in mid-July as a result of this settlement with the National Association of Realtors. Of course, if you want to reach out to me personally, you can call or text me at 843-800-0065, 843-800-0065, or listingsincharleston.com. We're talking about this NAR lawsuit this morning and the changes and the impact that it's going to have on our industry, on you, the consumer, and how we're going to roll with the punches, right? I think a lot of people are going to stick their head in the sand and just wait for these new changes to occur before they figure out what they want to do about it. We're making the changes right now. But in reality, we as South Carolinians that sell real estate have been every state's different, right? And so our way of doing real estate is extremely consistent with the changes that the National Association of Realtors has settled and agreed upon, right? So in other words, for us, not really all that big of a deal. Yeah, we got a few things we have to change around. There's not going to be a field in the MLS that tells us how much commission the seller is offering, but it's not preventing sellers from compensating buyer agents. It's just changing some formatting, and it's creating some transparency for the public, and it's also preventing greed. All these things I agree with, right? So if you have questions about this suit, if you've got some experience that you'd like to share on the matter, the number here in the studio, 843-556-1250. Feel free to call in, 843-556-1250. Even if you're a real estate agent listening, curious to hear your thoughts on it, if you'd be so bold. But if you want to reach out to me personally, right, you're thinking of buying a home or selling a home, you want to work with somebody that's experienced. You understand that the value of a real estate agent is not equal for everybody, right? As somebody that has been selling real estate for 19 years, has sold 1,500 homes and $1 billion worth of real estate locally, my value, my budget, my experience is vastly different than most. That being said, that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm more expensive, right? There's value, there are options, and that's what I think agents need to get used to, is articulating their value in a way that makes sense for that particular consumer, right? And stop being so rigid with regard to what they earn. They can still, there are still compensation types available for buyer agents, which is but not limited to, fixed fee compensation directly by consumers, a concession from the seller, or a portion of the listing broker's compensation, right? It used to be that the listing agent would earn 6% and share half of their commission or whatever percentage of commission they deemed appropriate with the buyer agent in return for them bringing the client, the buyer, to the transaction, all right? Another big change is that the National Association of Realtors has long encouraged its members to use written agreements for representation because they help people understand exactly what services and value will be provided and for how much, right? Well, the settlement provides that MLS participants working with buyers must enter into a written agreement for representation with those buyers before doing something like showing them a house. Okay? This is a big change. So many buyers out there call up agents, or they'll go to Zillow or whatever, and they'll say, yeah, I've got an interest in 123 Main Street. I just want to schedule a showing. And Zillow is all about making it so easy for the consumer, right? And I'm not going to go down that path right now because this is about the lawsuit, not about Zillow. But anyways, think about it from your perspective for just a moment. You're online, you're shopping for a home, you see something you like, you want to go and you want to walk through it. You want to see if, hey, wait a minute, is this actually going to be the house that causes us to move? Maybe you don't have to move, you're considering moving if the right thing comes along, And then you see it online and you're like, well, hey, you know what? Let's go walk through it this weekend. If it's something we really like, then maybe we'll make an offer. Maybe you're on the other side of the coin here. Maybe you have to move. Maybe you have a very finite window and you need to move, whether it's a job relocation or whatever. And also there are plenty of reasons to move that are not happy, right? Not happy reasons to move can create scenarios in which time is of the essence, right? You've got to do something quickly. Well, one of the big changes is that real estate agents can't show you homes without a written agreement for representation. In other words, you can't call up Zillow and say, hey, I want to go and tour this home, have someone meet me there. And if I like the house and I like the agent, maybe I'll consider working with them. That will not be allowed anymore. The only way that's going to be allowed is if that agent is okay with breaking the law. And there will be plenty of them. Let's be honest. It's a shame, but that's just the way it is. Now, mandating written agreements before discussing real estate not before discussing real estate. You need to discuss real estate. What's that real estate agent? What they're going to do for you. They need to apply for the job of being your realtor. In other words, before they go and they start showing you homes. I think this is a good thing. I have no challenge with demonstrating my value to a buyer. Again, partly because South Carolina has already mandated this. They are one of 11 states that already does this. The challenge is, in a survey that was used to reinforce the plaintiff's case in this NAR settlement, 59% of people said that they didn't have or didn't discuss a buyer agency agreement. They operated on a verbal one, or they didn't even know they had one. That is a failure in our industry. Agents have gotten too complacent. That I certainly agree with, because our industry does a poor job of policing and enforcing the rules and regulations. And part of it, too, is the way in which consumers view our value and our role in the process of buying a home. Again, from their perspective, they just want to go and see a house and see if they like it. We're viewed as door openers for a lot of folks. And for a long time, we've just had to be okay with that. Well, we can't do that anymore for you. You can't just call up some random agent and be like, hey, let me into that house. Think about how much better that is for you, the seller, by the way. For us as people that sell a lot of listings, we sell more listings than we sell homes to buyers. And that's just, it's like a 65% seller, 35% buyer split. A lot of agents would pay a lot of great money to have a business model like that because they just can't find a way to get listings. In order to do that, you need to demonstrate massive value. By the way, you need to have a fantastic marketing plan. You need to have a track record of success. I won't get into that too much. But I can't even think back that far, but we have always had to basically interview the agent showing the house because so many people were just coming in off the street and being let into homes without any form of qualification. This is a good thing, in my opinion. We would call agents that schedule showings on our listings, and we'd ask them, hey, if they walk through the house and they like what they see, are they in a position to make an offer? Are they ready to buy a house? Or is, someone visiting for Easter weekend and, they're thinking of retiring in Florida next year, and then at that point, they'd probably put their home on the market, but not before they sold their business. It's like, look, these folks are a year and a half, 2 years away from buying something. Why am I going to get kicked out of my house for an hour to let them walk through it? So the other thing is, are they paying cash? Are they pre-approved? Have they been through this process? If not, we might not cancel the showing, but we at least need to have an understanding of their financial wherewithal. And, is this your client? Do you represent them? What's their situation? What was it about this property that was of interest to them? A lot of those questions kind of go away now, or will in mid-July, because they have to be represented by a real estate agent. In other words, whether you knew it or not, way too many people were viewing your home that we're not being qualified appropriately by the agent. And that has been a huge differentiating factor between us and other agents over the years, is that we have the bandwidth and we're willing to put in the time to basically interview these agents before they step foot in your house and before we ask you to leave. It's this major inconvenience. And the problem is, because everything is digital these days, the people that are scheduling showings on your home don't even need to call the listing agent because a third-party service does everything for them, right? So we would have to call each agent and say, look, tell me a little bit about your buyer. I've got some questions. I want to make sure this is a good fit. I want to make sure this is a good use of my client's time. And we were probably canceling one in every 4 or 5 showings because they're not real showings. They're tire kickers. They're agents using your house to try and get a client at some point in the future. Well, guess what? One of these changes prevents an agent from using you and your house to try and get a client. Thank God for that. That's a great change. The challenge now is that you as a consumer are going to have to sit down and listen to an agent apply for the job of being your agent before they show you that house. So yeah, that's going to be a frustration for you. But you know what? It's worth it because this is a big deal. It's a big decision. It costs a lot of money. And you have the ability to earn or lose a lot of it throughout this transaction based on who you hire or whether you decide to do it on your own. Call me personally, 843-800-0065, 843-800-0065, or check us out online, listingsincharleston.com or on YouTube or iTunes, all those different places. Stick around, folks. We'll be right back. If you're just joining us, we are kind of at the tail end of the show, but we're talking about this massive, commission-related settlement that occurred with the National Association of Realtors, and the impact that it's going to have on you and the impact that's going to have on us and how it's just going to change this process. And so with the last few minutes, I'm just going to kind of wrap this up here. And first and foremost, just say that, look, I know a lot of real estate agents listen to this program. You have to know and show your value to people. We need to stop operating with the idea that we can get paid an exorbitant amount of money through a path of least resistance. We've got to put in the work. Sometimes things are easy and sometimes everything aligns and, we find a home that is exactly what the buyer's looking for and we're working with a seller that's easy to deal with and they're negotiable and everybody's happy. But it seems like that's just getting harder and harder and harder these days as this market continues to shift. But I think that with some of these changes, it's going to help and hurt folks. I think the people that are we've got to make some sort of change here. And this is something I'm very passionate about. And this is something that I will go to war over. And by go to war, I mean write letters to senators and show up and, do what I need to do to put in the work to help the veterans of our country. Because as of right now, whether you guys realize it or not, people that are getting VA loans cannot pay for a buyer agent's commission. So if we collectively as a group of sellers are saying, hey, we're no longer paying buyer agents, well, we have really hung vets out to dry. So something has to change there. Same thing with FHA buyers. I mean, they can't afford to pay a buyer's agent in most commissions. They're putting down 3.5%. They still need the seller to pay their closing costs. You know who really wins? Are cash buyers and investors. And the housing's already unaffordable. I mean, a new survey came out last month from Bankrate that said that 51% of people can't afford to buy a home due to the required monthly payment in relation to their total income. And 54% said that they don't make enough money to save for the down payment and closing costs needed to buy a house. Now, locally, here in our little corner of the world, we have what's called an affordability index of 76, which means that our local median income is only 76% of what is necessary to afford the median priced home in our market, giving prevailing interest rates and a 20% down payment, by the way. So we're already in a market that's unaffordable. We have been struggling to kind of balance the scales, if you will, between buyers and sellers. We've got an inventory crisis. We've got an affordability crisis. And unfortunately, this is going to hurt people that are lower and middle income home buyers, because a lot of sellers are going to be opportunistic about this. A lot of real estate agents are going to be opportunistic about this because they want the listings. They want the things to sell. So they're going to start touting, hey, don't even think about paying a buyer agent a commission. I'll sell it and I'll do it and blah, 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 blah. Which means that the buyer's going to have to pay a buyer agent commission. And a lot of them just can't afford to. But the misconception is that sellers can't pay a buyer agent. They still can. Of course they can. Ultimately, what is your goal as a seller? Do you want to hire an agent that aligns with those goals, or do you want to do it on your own? Those options have always existed, whether you knew it or not. And I think you probably knew. What if a seller doesn't want to pay a buyer agent commission? Well, agents won't work for free. If the seller isn't offering a commission and the buyer won't pay one, there's no room for us. And that's fine, but it is what it is. We are not a free service industry. Very few are. Name one. Buyers that can't afford to pay a buyer agent's commission are going to probably have to do something like hire an attorney to write the contract. And they're going to charge, a few $100 to write the contract, but they're not going to advise you, right? They're going to go around and, maybe they create some sort of separate wing for their firm. And they'll say, hey, flat fee every time you want to write an offer, it's X. Oh, hey, by the way, I've got 3 other closings today. I'm kind of busy, so I'll get to it when I get to it. Well, if we're still in a competitive market, then it might take several hours or a day to get around to writing that contract. What if you lose the house? What do you have to do that multiple times? What if it comes time for you to negotiate repairs or deal with appraisal gaps or termite and moisture-related issues or title issues or deal with deadlines in the contract? I mean, all the things that people don't really think about when they decide to go at it on their own. The point is, I think that sellers are still going to be open to paying a buyer agent a commission because they understand that the majority of people want representation. They need representation. They don't want to go at this on their own. They don't know anything about the market they're moving to. So we'll see as all this unfolds. Give me a call if you want more information, 843-800-0065 or listingsincharleston.com. That's listingsincharleston.com. You guys enjoy your weekend. Thanks for listening to the Brian Beatty Real Estate Show.